All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Property Players. I'm your host, C. Muzan. Got another special guest here with me. This gentleman and I got a chance to briefly have a little interaction. I think I was just following him on Facebook, honestly. I don't know if he paid attention to me at all, but I saw him doing some really big things over in the real estate investing world, the speaking world, and he was relatively close to home. He was right out in the Lancaster, PA area. So I wanted to bring him on and kind of chat with him and have him share his expertise. So Dave Zook is here with us. Dave, thanks so much for jumping on.
Thanks for having me on your show, Chris.
Absolutely. Pleasure's mine, man. So we're just going to jump straight in because, like I said, I've been kind of watching from afar on social as you get to know me, and all the listeners probably know, like, this is how I make a lot of my connections is 100% from social media, because I think it can help. This is what it does. It helps us connect, right,
Yep.
to the people that we want to be close to. And I just saw you doing some exciting things. So first off, kind of take me a step back and just tell me a little bit of how you were introduced into the real estate world, I guess.
I wasn't really introduced into the real estate world. I was chased into the real estate world. I had several different successful businesses that I was running, and I got myself into a real situation where I was paying a lot of money in tax. And I didn't understand at the time that you could use the real estate, specifically multifamily real estate, to really not only build wealth and cash flow streams, but to really kind of build them as a tax vehicle. And so that's what chased me into the real estate space. I got to study in that space and really, after being a heavy taxpayer for several years, once I got to understand that real estate can be a tax protection vehicle, I got really interested. And I went from, not hardly owning any real estate at all, and really my primary or core focus was business, to all of a sudden wanting as much real estate as I could get my hands on. So I got into the multifamily apartment space. Been in that space for the last couple of years, although we haven't bought anything for the last year and a half. So we're not really in that market for, to make acquisitions right now,
Sure.
but know a lot about the space.
So as a business owner, what businesses were you in?
So our family business and the business that I was sort of involved in from the time I was 6 years old and growing up was a modular building business.
Okay.
And we're here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, like you mentioned, and we've employed between 80 and 100 employees.
Wow.
And we ship buildings all over the country. And so normally they're buildings, and we have a couple different entities and a couple different businesses. One is primarily a detached garage and storage shed business, modular. We build them here at our plant and ship them out. The other one is a modular cabin, like a sort of a second home, rustic sort of cabin living type of a building. It's a modular cabin. Name of that business is Zook Cabins. And had a couple different, most of the businesses that I had were sort of spawned from our family business and sort of some version of a modular building business.
Sure.
And then there was a couple other ones as well, but primarily in the modular building business.
Okay. So as you're going down that path, like how did you get introduced to knowing that real estate was more of a tax vehicle in a way to, shield some of that money going to the government?
I got hit with about $500,000 tax bill.
Yeesh.
And it's amazing when you suffer a lot of pain, how much you can sort of learn and how much educating you can do, and how you kind of just go down that path. But no, I dove in, and I kept one of the guys that was very influential to me was Robert Kiyosaki. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and his statement that you can make millions of dollars in income or make millions of dollars a year and pay zero in tax or very little in tax just intrigued me. So I had to find out what that was all about. And I figured the best way to find out was go hunt him down. So I stalked him, and since that time, and I spent a week with him on a cruise,
Yeah.
and since that time, we've had dinner together a few times, met each other on a number of occasions. But he was very influential in you know
Is that the,
making that decision and start me down that path to educating myself.
yeah, and Rich Dad Poor Dad is one of those books I give everyone. Was that the first time you read it? Was when you got hit with the tax bill, or that was something that you had read previously?
It was around that time. It was around, I think it was prior to getting that tax bill, but I was starting to get a little bit familiar. But again, I didn't have enough of pain to spur me into action.
That's it.
So I was learning, I was reading, and I was kind of getting familiar with it. But until you really have to sometimes, especially, I mean, I was busy. I was busy doing, running several different businesses
Right.
and all that. So I didn't really have time to dig into it too deep. But then, on top of that, I saw the opportunity, like coming out of 2009 and 10, and sort of seeing that opportunity, and properties that had previously been selling at real premiums were now selling at a discount, and the cash flow, the numbers made a lot of sense, and so it was just a combination of things, and timing was one of them.
Sure. Absolutely. I'm gonna go back to a point that you said that I just want to hone in for the listeners, because it's the pain that you were going through that caused you to go find a solution. And
Oh yeah.
a lot of times people avoid the pain, right? They avoid they're scared to take the first step because they're scared of what may happen or what may come up. And in your case, it was going through that pain of, man, now, where am I going to come up with $500,000, right? Like, I don't know why I owe this to the government. That you went and actively sought out the answers to it. And as Robert Kiyosaki says, right, because I'm a big fan too, as he always says, right, a statement closes the mind, a question opens the mind. And so when people start to say things like, I can't afford it, or I can't do this, it closes your mind. But when you start to ask yourself, how can I? How can I? And that's probably the process you went through of, how can I pay this tax? How can I avoid this next time? How can I? And you sought out the answer.
You must have seen one of my presentations, because I talk about that specifically.
I've actually never, to be honest, Dave, I've actually never seen it. But again, like, this is how I know we're like-minded. That's why I
Yeah,
had to have you on the show,
yeah,
because you can just kind of tell when people get it, right?
yeah. No, I've got a whole one of my slides in my presentation that I pretty much talk about every time I speak to a group is exactly that. Train your mind to think, how can I? And when you do that, doors will open up to you.
That's it.
And so that's key.
That's it. What did you always have that mindset of seeking out the people that had your information, right? Like, once you figured out, hey, Robert Kiyosaki's probably the guy I need to find, and then go down that path. Because again, that's not normal. Most people don't seek out aggressively, right? Coaches or mentors. Have you always had that? Has that always been a part of you?
I don't know that I've always had that, but I can tell you that I've certainly adopted it, especially in the last decade. Somebody was talking to me last night about what I know about cryptos, and I'm like, well, nothing.
Right.
And I mean, although I've invested in a few cryptos, just kind of, as pocket change, and a you know, very small portion of my liquid assets is in cryptos. But when I get into something like that, I'm tapping into somebody who's got their mind wrapped around the space, and I'm paying for their advice.
Right.
I'm a good personal friend of Tika Tori, who's he's with the Palm Beach Letter, and he's probably, well, one of the world's foremost authorities on cryptos.
Yeah.
So getting around people who know the space. I mean, I've got partners in the ATM space, and that's what they do. That's their life. I've got, you know, when I want to buy a self-storage asset, I don't just go out and buy a self-storage asset. I go find one of the best teams I can associate myself with, and I partner with them. We go out and do a deal together. So yeah, I mean, to your point, I seek out the people who are experts in the space, people who have their 10,000 hours, and I'd rather partner with them and try to figure it out all on my own.
Again, super important. And another Robert Kiyosaki thing, right? Like, and I talk about this a bunch. entrepreneur mindset versus employee mindset, and how school hasn't set us up to be able to know that business is a team sport, right?
Yeah.
And that you're supposed to go find the best of, right, that industry, the person with the most knowledge of that, whatever that you're trying to do, and then partner with them and then
Yep.
use their expertise. It doesn't have to be that you know everything about everything. And a lot of people get that mistaken, you know?
Yep. No, I
So
totally agree.
yeah. So now walk me a little bit forward after you do seek out, Robert Kiyosaki, and you get a chance to kind of chat with him. And then once you now see that, okay, real estate might be the thing that can help me avoid some of these taxes. What were some of your first steps in starting it? Was it assembling a team, or what were kind of your first moves?
Yeah, it was. So one of the first things I did was I went on a 3-day tour with the real estate guys, and went down to Memphis and spent a couple of days on the ground, and they introduced me to some good team players. And once I had the team assembled, a good broker, a good banker, a good some of those guys that are essential to you know uh, making those deals happen for you. Once I had those guys assembled, then I went to market looking for a property. So that's another thing that I typically do is, you know, most people, they'll go find the asset, they'll purchase the asset, then they'll try to build a team around it. Then they figure out, well, it's the asset is on the wrong side of the tracks, or it's probably not the best area of town, or some of those things that a really good team can help you mitigate or not make those mistakes.
Right.
And so I built the team. We went out and bought some assets, bought a couple hundred apartment units on my own. Eventually got to the point where I ran out of my own cash. I invited some friends into my next deal, and I never really started out in this space thinking I was going to be a syndicator. I was doing it for myself.
Sure.
And once I got into that space and realized that, oh, okay, I had a need, there's other people who have needs. I could
Sure.
probably I could probably help them as well as continue to do more deals, because now I got my team set up.
Right.
And so
Let me
yeah,
stop. Let me stop you there real quick, because I'm sure for some of the listeners, they might not even know that. Like, what does the team consist of? How do you find it? What do you look for? Take us through like each part of the team that you set up, and then what you look for in each of them.
probably the most important team member is your property manager.
Okay.
And one of the things I would want to encourage your listeners is, it's always more important to take advice from your property manager than it is from your broker. Your broker's a sales guy. He wants to sell you the deal. Your property manager, he's the guy that's going to have to make the deal work. And so you can typically get a pretty honest answer from a property manager. And I'll give you an example. I went to San Antonio. I wanted access. I wanted exposure to the San Antonio market. I had friends that were in that market. I believed in that market. And so I asked the friends of mine, I said, hey, you're in this market. Can you share some of your team members, your broker, your property manager? And when they did, I let them help me find the deal. So
Mm.
I said to him exactly. I said, um, if you had an area of the city where you said, man, if I just have more inventory in that area, and if I could just manage more properties in that area of town, where would that be? And they took me out to development. They were selling brand new fourplexes, and I bought a couple fourplexes in that development. And to this day, I mean, I've owned them now for a lot of years, and almost forget that I own them. I mean, you just don't hear anything about them. They stay well occupied, and every month I get an email saying that the money was ACH'd into my account. And it just, when you do it right on the front side, and
Right.
you let your team help you find the asset, it can be a much more fun experience and a much more successful experience than if you go out there and try to do it on your own and then assemble a team after you get the asset.
Absolutely. And again, I think most people do it backwards, right? And you probably see that in your experience, right? Like you said, most people are going to find the asset and purchase the asset. And then they're saying, well, like, I guess I need somebody to help me with this, or maybe I should reach out to this person. And that's actually, it's backwards. So, obviously you knew that process kind of going in. What were some of the hiccups or challenges kind of take me through that, because nothing's ever smooth sailing, nothing's ever perfect all the way through. What were some of your hiccups in after assembling the team and like finding those assets?
Oh, not everything goes perfect in your business.
Not so much, not so much.
Yeah, I mean, things were going well for a number of years, and then my partner gets stage 4 cancer, and that went down this whole that went down this whole path. Got to the point where his team, his right hand man, was not the person we thought he was, and the portfolio goes into a slide. I had to actually step in and take over and put new management in place. I mean, just some of those things, and so yeah, you're right. I mean, very seldom does everything go right in business, but in answer to your previous question, the most important people on the team, I would say property management first, and then just a really good broker that understands the market.
Gotcha. And how do you, again, you just asking people for those referrals? How do you do your due diligence to find a broker?
You certainly, if you have some friends that are doing business in that market, I mean, referrals are always, your best source. I mean, you can go to the internet and figure out who's selling real estate. If you're familiar with a market, with a certain market, and you know where to look, it usually doesn't take really long to find out who your all stars are in that market.
Sure.
And so connecting with a really good broker was a big piece of the deal. But having a reliable source, having people that already knew the market or have done business there, and having them point to a really good broker, a really good property manager, it certainly shortcuts the process.
Absolutely. Okay, so those are the two main people that you're thinking about, are property managers and then a broker. Anyone else that you need to assemble on a team?
Yeah, legal, lenders, and then you got to fill in the pieces around that. But the first two are certainly ones that you want to really be sure about. And then of course there's a half a dozen other people, but for sure lenders, insurance agents. You want to have a good relationship with those guys as well.
Sure. What and on the lending side, because I come across a lot of lenders, are you dealing with one lender, or you're dealing with 5, 6, whoever can kind of get you the best thing for the best rate, or how do you do it?
We're dealing with several, I would say probably at this point 3 or 4. We assumed a HUD loan, so we got a different lender for that property. We some of our properties are financed using agency loans, Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and then we've got a couple relationships with local lenders. Let's say you're getting into a property where you want to do some value add and you want to refinance into an agency loan. There we'll use local lenders. So combination, but I'd say probably at this point it's we're dealing with 3 or 4 in that market.
Got it. So now kind of take me forward. What are you up to now in business? Obviously, since you started to get and purchase these assets after you had your team put together. What are you focused on now in the real estate world?
Right now so I've got a good management team taking care of our multifamily apartments. We're actually selling into this market. We're selling. We're taking some profits. We're going to be actively selling into this market. Not all of our stuff, but it's we may sell half of our portfolio in the next 12 to 18 months.
And why? Like, is it just the right time? Is it a personal need or a business need?
I feel it's the right time.
Yeah.
I feel it's the right time, and there was a number of reasons, but one of them, probably the strongest one, is because of the market that we're in.
Yeah.
We started buying these in 2010, 11, and it's a great opportunity.
Absolutely. And you don't know when that cycle is going to start to come down the other way. And it seems like this would be a good time to start to sell off some of the portfolio. Do you have ideas of what to do with it? Like what you're looking to do?
So we're transitioning a lot. Over the last 2 years, we've been transitioning a lot into the self-storage space. Found a really good team. We've closed a bunch of different transactions now in the last 2 years with this team, and just super excited to be working with them. Very successful team. Vetted them. They vetted really well, and also one of the things that spoke volumes to me is I had a number of different conversations with their investors,
Mm.
who've invested with them over the last 10, 12 years, and couldn't say enough of good things about them. So that's the kind of thing I'm very, typically I'm much more concerned or much more interested in hearing what an investor of yours is saying about you than what you're saying about you.
Absolutely.
So, just going down that path, and then of course you got to do, background checks, and in my case, I brought him up here, and a really good friend of mine was the chairman of the board of the National Self Storage Association, so he was really connected in the space, and so we connected with these guys and did a bunch of deals with them. But so self storage, very active in the self storage space. We've really grown our ATM portfolio in the last couple of years. We're now one of the top 5 operators in the ATM space in the country,
Okay.
and so very active there. And then we've also got a project going on down south of Dallas, where we're taking coal and we're processing the coal and extracting liquids and oil from the coal,
Hmm.
and we're selling them to big Fortune 10, household name companies. We've got fixed price contracts for this oil. And it's not the kind of oil you would burn in a truck or a tractor. It's the kind of oil they use for cosmetics and pharmaceuticals and skincare. Most of those products have, their core ingredient is coal.
Sure.
So we're selling that under contract, and the cash flow is great. The tax benefits are awesome,
Yeah.
and it's a project we're really excited about and expect to do a lot of business in that space next year or
That's
this year.
exciting. That's exciting. And honestly, for the listeners, I'm sure this is one of the first times we've had anyone on the show that kind of does anything outside of your traditional, multifamily fix and flip, buy and hold, like outside of that. So like, talk to me a little bit about each of those spaces. Let's start with the, self-storage space. Why outside of the connections, right? And you got into it, but like, what's happening on that side? Why is that attractive? Why is that something people should be looking into?
One of the things I'm excited about is the business model that we have, that our team has. Number one, we've got really good relationships with the REITs. The REIT appetite for this asset class has grown a lot in the last year or two, and so our business model, we'll go in and buy a stabilized or semi-stabilized asset from a mom and pop investor. Most of the time, that mom and pop investor, this is the only asset that they own. They don't own 2, 3, or 5 of them. There's no economies of scale. We put professional management in there. We typically are going in and adding square footage. We're adding climate controlled units, or we're doing some kind of we're forcing a value.
Sure.
And then we're really juicing the NOI. We're really getting to the point where this is the kind of asset now that becomes a REIT target. And within 3 to 4 years, we're taking it and we're flipping it to a REIT. And when you buy at a 6.75 cap, and then you force a bunch of value, and then you turn around and roll it to a REIT at a 4.5 to 4.8 cap, there's some margin there.
Absolutely.
So that's been kind of our business model. We project out 6 years, but if you look at our history over the last 21 deals, we've been flipping these deals in just over 3 years.
Wow. Okay. And so that obviously the business model indicates that was a sector that you wanted to get into. And then the next one on ATMs, right? Talk to me about that side.
Well, let me just say one more thing
Yeah.
on self-storage. One of the things that really attracted me to the space was it's historically been a very recession-resistant asset class. Like when things are, then when there's disruption in the market,
Mm-hmm.
self-storage typically does really well. When there's jobs being downsized, people relocating, people moving from their homes into an apartment building, the whole apartment building trend of people moving into apartment, where they're storing their stuff.
Yeah.
Like if you got a single family home on a half acre, you got a storage shed in the backyard.
Right.
You live in a 2-bedroom apartment, there ain't no storage shed.
Right.
So now these people are storing their stuff in self storage facilities, and so you look at all those things, and you look at divorce, any kind of disruption in the marketplace provides a really good environment for self storage. So when you get into an asset class that does really well in good times, then does really well, maybe even better in bad times. I like
Sure.
it. So
Sure.
you look at where we are in the cycle, and you look at what if we have some kind of a slowdown or cool down, a recession or whatever. I want to be in an asset class that'll do well through that whole time.
Absolutely. And so that all those points, I didn't even really think about, but are 100% true. When there is any type of disruption, and all those things are going to be true, right? People moving more into renting, more into that apartment, people going that direction. And then, like you said, divorce, whatever happens with the economy, all those things lend to pointing people in the direction of the asset class that you own. And
Yep.
so that's just very, very smart, very smart.
So I started out as an ATM investor passively. So I got introduced to this group. They're long time, actually. They've lived here in Lancaster County all their life. Two of my partners, and they got into the ATM space. They were very well known in this area, very highly regarded business guys in this area. Got into the space passively, invested with them several times from 2012 to 2016, well into the 7 figures. At the same time, I was investing, or I was growing my network in the syndication space and my multifamily apartment space, and so these were running parallel with each other. And so at one point in 2016, my now partners came to me and said, "Hey, we took down this large portfolio of ATMs. It's the biggest one we've ever done. We could use some help." And they saw what I was doing in the multifamily space, and they came to me and with the offer and said, "Hey, partner with us." And turned them down at first, and then eventually got to the point where this investment makes a lot of sense for me.
Yeah.
It could make a lot of sense for my investors, and so I rolled it out to my investors in 2016, became a partner with the team, and we've been doing ATMs. We've been doing a lot of ATMs since then.
Why did you turn them down in the first place, right? Like what wasn't attractive?
It was attractive, but I had a lot going on. I just, I was working on 2 different multifamily deals at the time. I just didn't think I had enough bandwidth to make it happen.
Sure.
But then it got to the point where those deals got done, and I took another look at it, and I asked myself the question, like, hey, this fits my model.
Right.
We teach this stuff. Invest for cash flow, invest for depreciation. Tax protection. Not only get the cash flow, but also keep the cash flow.
Sure.
And so the model works really well for me, and it's what I teach, and I think my investors would probably like it as well. So that's sort of what kind of opened me up to the idea, and eventually got me to the point where, all right, let's do it.
Yeah. How does the tax tax breaks work on the side of the ATM investor?
So you can depreciate 100% of your investment in 5 years. So, basically what that means is most of the cash flow coming from the ATM surcharge revenue is tax-free.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's a lot of people don't know that, because I didn't know that. You just educated me on that side, because I've never even really looked into that ATM side. But again, always understanding that the more that you can, right? And again, this is what I teach people financially, because a lot of the times people don't understand that taxes are the thing that you and I, right? It's our largest expenditure, the thing we'll spend the most money on. And if we aren't aware of how to shield our money from taxes, we will constantly pay them and essentially not build wealth, right?
You'll be a slave.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so understanding that there are other outlets to be able to, get those tax benefits is going to be incredibly important. How do you scale that? Is it similar to scaling anything else? Is you just find new markets, find new assets? Is there a limited amount of like ATM assets? Like, how does that work?
So normally there's two kinds of ATM players or operators. There's the small mom and pops. They'll be hands-on operators. They'll handle up to 150 to 200 machines if they're aggressive in a 50-mile radius, and they'll service those machines. And one can make a really nice living doing that. There's nothing the matter with that model. The second model is the institutions, the Cardtronics of the world, big billion-dollar revenue companies, public companies. So there's never really been anyone, to my knowledge, anyone in between. So what we do is we play in that institutional space. We take down large institutional grade portfolios. When I'm talking about institutional grade portfolios, I'm talking, we own all of the McDonald's in all 5 boroughs of New York City. Those are institutional grade locations. Heavy foot traffic areas where typical mom and pops would not have access to those sorts of portfolios.
How do you come across that portfolio? Like who's do you have a broker on that side? Like, how do you come across it?
There's a market around the ATM space, just like there's a market around the multifamily apartment space. There's brokers, there's bankers, there's lenders. There's a marketplace for them. Now, it's a lot nichier, it's a lot smaller, but relationships, having the right team around you that knows what they're doing. Those are the kinds of you got to have somebody that knows the space. You got to have your 10,000 hours in. You got to be a professional in space, or you'll get eaten alive.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's with most things. And most people, again, back to what I was saying, most people don't surround themselves with the experts, the people that have put in those 10,000 hours. They're just trying to figure it out themselves.
On our team, we've got well over 100 years of ATM experience on our team. It's a pretty deep team, and we just hired a few years ago. We just hired one of the top 3 execs in one of the largest ATM companies in the country, and this guy was head of acquisitions, and so you can imagine the relationships that he had built over the last 20-25 years, and it's given us an incredible pipeline of opportunity of inventory in the space. So just having the right team and having the right people on the team, and knowing the space really well.
Absolutely. That's important. So those are 2 spaces. We talk about, self-storage, talk about the ATM space. What was the next space that you said you were looking into that was exciting you?
So over the last couple of years, we've been taking coal and running it through a process. The process is patented. The equipment's patented, both internationally and domestically. We're taking the coal, running through this equipment, slow speeds, high heat. We're extracting liquids from the coal. So when you get coal to a certain temperature, it starts breaking down, and it releases gas, oil, and liquid.
Sure.
This is the kind of stuff where if you got skincare, if you got ladies wearing the stuff around their eyes, and the cosmetics, and also at a hospital, you go to the hospital and they hook you up to some kind of medication, some kind of drug going straight into your blood vein. Yeah. It's most likely it's coal based. Wow. So you got a very unique, very niche product, and we're selling it for almost 3 times what you're selling, regular conventional oil, West Texas Intermediary, Brent, some of those oils. We're selling it for almost 3 times that, and we're selling it under contract to one of the largest companies in the country, which I could talk to you about offline. But it's a name that you would know. Yeah. So, we're getting the same amount of tax benefits as the oil and gas guys are getting when they go out and drill a well, but for a fraction of the risk. So one of the biggest, 2 of the biggest risks in an active oil and gas drilling well is, number one, you got the drilling risk. Mm-hmm. We don't have drilling risk. We're going out into an open pit mine. We're getting the coal. We're bringing it to plant. We're processing it. Mm-hmm. Number 2 is you got the price volatility. I've been an oil and gas investor since 2011. Okay. So I know what it feels like going from, investing in a field where there's, $60 to $70 oil, and it goes up to 110, and it goes to, 30.
Right.
So, I know what that feels like. So, that's a risk.
Yeah.
If your timing's good, if you get in at the right time and you get into a good well, you can make a lot of money. If it's not, you won't.
Right.
So, we're taking out two of the biggest risk, but we're getting the same amount of tax benefits. And the reason the government gives investors the tax benefits that they do is because they're asking investors to go out and take the risk and getting this work done for them.
Right.
So they're giving them the tax benefits for it. We're getting those same kind of tax benefits: 100% bonus depreciation up front, 15% depletion allowance on any income that comes from, selling the liquids. So it's one of the most tax beneficial investment asset classes that I know of. And on top of that, it's great cash flow. I mean, great consistent cash flow, because we got, fixed price contracts that are locked in at a premium to what conventional oil is selling for.
Sure. Man, it sounds like I'm talking to Robert Kiyosaki, right? Like I listen a lot to him, and I know just off of his podcast and some of the other things, right? That like I know he was in, I don't know if it was coal, it might have been oil, something along that lines out in China, and he had that deal fall through because like the Chinese government came and like wind up seizing it from him or something of that nature, right?
I'm familiar with the story, and he is a big oil investor. He's a big oil and gas investor, and
Yeah.
it's been doing it for a lot of years.
Yeah, and honestly, again, this is the information that a lot of people don't necessarily go down that path to think about asset classes. It's something that I speak heavily on because for most novice investors, right, people that are just getting into it, whatever type of investing they want to call it, whether it's real estate investing or investing in other asset classes, they don't really understand the different asset classes and how to minimize risk and how to avoid tax. So again, has this always been something that you've wanted to go down that path to understand? Was it literally just the catalyst from the tax bill that got you to this place? Did you always know that, of investing in different asset classes that had these benefits was the way that you and your family were going to build wealth? How did you get to this place, Dave?
I've been an investor since I was in my teens.
Okay.
So I've been investing in all kinds of things from, the time I was in my teens to today. And, obviously, well, as you can imagine, there's some things that I invested in that I would never invest in again,
Of course.
but, as you kind of, pick your way through and you figure out, okay, here's what works and here's what doesn't, and you take some whoopings along the way, and you figure out, that's one of the things it's one of the reasons why I'm always talking about the team, invest with the great team, invest in the people.
Sure.
Because I mean, it's not that I was given some God-given ability of uh, I wasn't born with that.
Right.
That got pounded into me because I learned the hard way.
Sure.
So I wouldn't say that I was very intentional of getting into the space or into the business where I'm today, but I've been an investor since I was in my early teens, and of course I enjoy investing. For me, it's a sort of form of farming. You're planting the seed, and you're planting that seed, and then you're nurturing it, and then you see it blossom, and then you see it, you get the harvest, and that's just a lot of fun for me. I love that stuff. So I've been an investor since I was a kid, and I'll probably be an investor to the day I die.
Sure, sure. What are you doing it for? Is this a family? Is this a legacy thing? Is it just because it's fun and you're good at it and you have the resources now? What still motivates you every day?
I love this kind of stuff. So I mean, I'll be doing it till I either can't or I'm tired of it,
Sure.
which I doubt that I ever get tired of it. But no, I love this kind of stuff, and then being able to take what I've learned and leverage the networks and the relationships that I've built, and then go to a business owner that's spent the last 20 years building up a very successful business, and now is sitting on a pile of cash, has no idea what to do with it, hasn't educated himself in investing or tax, And now he's like, okay, what's next? What do I do now? And where do I start? And being able to leverage my network, my relationships, and help those kind of people build wealth. I have a lot of fun with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what are you doing now on a day-to-day? I know you have some speaking things that you do, or, a group of people that you're also teaching, correct?
Yeah, so I teach. I'm on the phone a lot. I'm helping people walk through their um, tax liabilities or situations. If somebody's selling their business, there's a number of different ways that we can, help them offset the tax liability in that business sale.
Mm-hmm.
Or even, let's say, once the business gets sold, then what? Now you're sitting on a pile of cash, and how do I best uh, take that cash and use it responsibly to the point where I don't end up with a big tax bill. So being able to kind of help people and use what I've learned over the years for myself, and then watching them. Look, I like talking to people about getting a good return, talking to people about cash on cash returns, IRRs. But what really gets me going is when I can save somebody in the first year. I can put somebody in a good cash flowing investment and get them a good first year's 37% return, just because they didn't have to pay the tax, just
Right.
because they invested in such a way that their first year's return, forget about the cash flow, is 37%. Because had they not made that investment, they'd end up paying 37% to the government.
Sure.
So, and then when you can take that to the next level and invest in such a way, or aggressively enough, or enough to the point where now you can start dropping tax brackets.
Sure.
You were a 37% taxpayer, but if you do this, and this, and you invest in a couple of these different asset classes, you'll drop down into 15 or 18% tax bracket. That's so
That's
much fun.
huge. That's huge. That's huge. That's exciting. So let the people know, as we're wrapping up, let people know like how they can get in touch with you, where to find you, how to reach out.
So our website is therealassetinvestor.com. And if you reach out to me or my team, if you send an email to info@therealassetinvestor.com, someone will reach out to you and connect with you.
Awesome. There it is, guys. So, for all the listeners, for everyone that's kind of following what we're doing here, this is incredible amounts of information that I would take Dave up on that, right? If you can find a way to get in touch with him or his team and actually ask some of your questions, and then start to go down that path of seeing how you can start to invest in assets similarly, to have those tax benefits and do some of the work of the government, right? So that you can actually take advantage of it, then reach out. That's what this is about. The reason why, again, I do this podcast is to make sure that we are all getting the information that we need and putting ourselves in a position to do what's right, to put our family in the best position to build wealth. And Dave, you've been incredibly insightful today. I'm sure you've helped a ton of people. If just one parting word, if you can give like the listeners maybe the first couple steps, or like what you get a piece of advice of what you can give them if they're just getting started in the process of any of the three areas that we talked about, what would you give them as one parting piece of advice?
So I'll give them a piece of advice. I'll also give them a write-up that I put together. It's called the 8 Real Life Lessons for Syndicators and Their Investors. And if you send an email, if your guests send an email to info@therealassetinvestor.com, I'd be happy to send them a copy of that. And then I just shared this with our church youth group last night. They asked for a nugget of wisdom, and I said, look, if you do the hard stuff today, you'll have an easy life. You make the hard decisions today, you have an easy life. You choose the easy decisions today, you're going to have a hard life. And I'll just give you an example. Like if you have the discipline to make, and I'll say this carefully because, Robert Kiyosaki fans, this will be blasphemy to a Robert Kiyosaki fan, but save your money so that you can invest the money. If you have the discipline to save the money, to invest the money, if you have the discipline to not just go out and spend all your money and create bad debt and all that, but if you have the discipline to save your money so that you can invest your money today, let's say we're talking to a 25-year-old or even a 35-year-old, make the hard decision. The easy decision is go out and spend it, right?
Right.
Make the hard decisions and put the disciplines in place to where you can invest the money. And if you do that consistently, in 10 years from now, your life will be easy.
Absolutely.
If you don't do that and you go out and do what's easy today and just go spend it, and life's going to be hard for you.
Absolutely. And so we will end with that. Yes, to all the hardcore Robert Kiyosaki fans, yes, we still believe savers are losers, but at the end of the day, you got to have something saved in order to be able to invest. So I understand exactly what you're saying, Dave. And for everyone that's out there, take that nugget of wisdom and make the tough decisions, make the hard choices right now, because it will make your life easier down the line. So Dave, thanks so much for coming on the podcast, man. Really appreciate it.
It was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on your show.
Absolutely. And to everyone that's listening, again, check in with me, shoot me a message, send Dave a message. We want to be able to help. But until then, everyone stay well. Take care.